I heard my husband pull in at around 5 p.m., but it wasn't for another 10 minutes that I knew something was off. He had been sitting in his car that entire time without moving. We don't have the space for two cars in our driveway, so whoever gets home last has to park out on the street. Usually he walks in immediately with some hot and exciting piece of gossip from the office. Today was not that day. As I walked out, I noticed the windshield was badly cracked. The visibility through the glass was so awful, I don't even know how he managed to drive home. It was quite an annoying sight given we just paid a fortune on the last service. He didn't even acknowledge me as I approached the car. His eyes were laser focused on the rear vision mirror. I tried to gauge what he was looking at and glanced up the neighborhood. There was nothing out of the ordinary. It was a quiet one-way street, cute weatherboard houses, freshly cut lawns, and a couple of shady gum trees that loomed over the neighborhood's cars. Exactly what we wanted. It seemed everyone else was inside in a bid to get out of the relentless heat wave. I opened up the passenger door and sat beside him. What happened to the windshield? He sat in silence, gaze locked onto the mirror. His mouth barely moved. Kangaroo. My stomach lurched. Hitting a kangaroo can be a death sentence for a driver. It wasn't uncommon to see them in our suburb as it fringes the rural bushland, but getting one on the road is still really scary. I could make out the bloodied point of impact in the glass. He was lucky to be unharmed. Are you okay? I don't know. It was sweltering, and he didn't have the air conditioner on. He leant over and shut my door. His eyes remained fixed on the mirror. I wanted to ask what was going on, but then I caught a glimpse. In the rear vision mirror, an obscured person stood at the top of the street. I couldn't make out their silhouette due to the shade from the gum trees, but it definitely looked human. It stood completely still. Its presence filled my body with unbridled dread. I turned my head to get a better view through the rear window. The figure vanished. And the figure vanished. It had gone in less than a second. I wish that was the last time I ever saw it. But as I glanced back into the mirror, the figure returned. I snapped my head back to the window. It disappeared. It seemed this mysterious person was only visible through the mirror's reflection. I'd never seen anything like this and thought the heat was making me hallucinate. David, what is that? I noticed my husband's breath had become quite shaky. He was terrified. I don't know, he whispered. Normally, it would be comforting to know you weren't imagining such a thing. This confirmation was anything but. The figure began to step forward. Its movements were staggered as it dragged itself to the nearest car. It slowly reached out an arm and swung open the door. It seemed to be looking for something. Unsatisfied with its results, it slammed the door and hurried to the next car in line. I think we should head inside. My husband pushed down the car door locks and looked at me with a finger over his lip. I've never seen him so scared. Small beads of sweat were streaking down his face and dripping off his chin. He shook his head and indicated for us to remain. I wanted to suggest that we drive away, turn on the engine, and never look back at the thing. However, facing the street's dead end made this option impossible. We would have to turn the car around and head straight for the figure if we were to leave. An easy escape wasn't factored in when we were initially drawn to this quiet street. We slowly slid down our chairs and watched as the figure opened and closed the neighborhood's cars, making its way up the street. It would appear to anyone watching without a mirror that the doors were moving on their own volition. Their metallic clunking rang out in a disjointed rhythm. My husband was really struggling. It seemed the stress of this ever-growing threat had caused him to repeat the only two phrases he had just uttered. Kangaroo. I don't know. Kangaroo. I don't know. The figure was far too close when I realized most of our neighbors would also have their cars locked. It clearly didn't stop the thing. We should have gone inside. The figure's footsteps approached, scuffling along the tarmac. We were next. My husband covered his mouth with a trembling hand. There was complete silence as we held our breath. The locks popped up. The back seat door swung open, and we felt the weight of the figure enter. The vehicle wobbled and the back door closed. We were no longer alone. Something was breathing back there. It was a wheezy kind of breath, followed by a slight gurgle, like a lung had been punctured. I had to look. I reached up to the rearview mirror and angled it downwards. My husband stared at me with widened eyes, shocked at my curiosity. A part of me wished I hadn't done that. In the back seat was a bloodied man. He stared at me, eyes bulging in pain. He looked dead. I think he was dead. His entire face had been crushed and his body was horribly disfigured. He held up a severely broken arm and pointed it towards himself before turning it to the damaged windshield. I followed his finger to the bloodied point of the impact on the glass. I froze. I didn't want it to be true. The bloodied man fixed his gaze onto my husband's seat. My mouth was dry of any moisture, but my question still managed to scratch itself out. David? What happened with the windshield? Kangaroo. I don't know. Kangaroo. I don't know. As I closed the car door, I heard it lock behind me. Both my husband and the man were still inside. I don't know which one had put the locks back down, but I've decided it wasn't my fate to find out. I went back to the house and removed every single mirror we owned. I never saw either of them again.
Thank you for watching this video. Big shout out to my patrons, Leaf Ninja, Roy Larimer, Mr. Creepypasta, Nicole Kister, Neon Scoundrel, William Delphin, and So Much Heresy. If you want to become a patron, buy merch, or join my Discord server, be sure to check out the links in the description. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.